Frank Brummer. What can I say about Frank Brummer? What do you say about a guy who comes to the biggest event of his life in a fluorescent green shirt and orange tennis shoes? Is that orange or is it pink? Well, what you say, obviously, is he's a guy who marches to his own drummer. He's a guy who's full of enthusiasm. He's a person who, he's a man who is passionate about what he does and has expressed that throughout his life with great success. When we first started planning this breakfast, Frank Brummer was my first choice and only choice for speaker, and he played hard to get for a while, but I'm really very happy to have the privilege and honor of introducing a very good friend and a remarkable community contributor to speak at this breakfast. I really thought there was going to be a program on the programs that would give a basic outline of Frank's career. I wasn't planning to do that myself, but very briefly, he was born and raised on a farm in Bishop Creek, Bishop St. Ambrose Parish. Started his own business right out of junior college, way back when, sometime. Built a very successful business, engineering business, fabrication, farm weld, internationally known, and that is still operating very successfully into topless today. Frank sold out, recognizing that to everything there is a season, and said he was going to dedicate the rest of his life to competitive cycling and other crazy stuff like that. But he has found time for taking the leadership of Trek, Trails Recreation, Effingham County, misspelled, but there it is. And under Frank's leadership, Trek has been, and with a lot of help from some wonderful people like Frank and Ann Cabas, for instance, here in the room, and I apologize to anybody whom I don't recognize, but Trek has done a fantastic job in starting to build and building out a trails network, which is enhancing the quality of life in Effingham County. And that, Frank promises, is the last you will hear about Trek this morning. So don't worry about that. For those of you who've had to listen to Frank before, go on and on and on about trails. Frank has a great story to tell about his career, about the lessons he's learned, about just how wonderful it is to be giving your passion and realizing your vision as a community contributor. And I've said enough, so now I'm going to invite Frank up here. He's sitting at the table with his family, by the way, who he said he is not going to introduce, and I'm not either, but I just think it's great that the family is here and the Farmwell family is here, and great support for a really wonderful guy, man. You know, I read this quote from a movie that I never saw. A woman talking to a young man, a young woman talking to a young man, saying, "The world is full of guys. Don't be a guy. Be a man." Jews would say, be a mensch, somebody who's really responsible, somebody who cares, somebody who does what is expected of him to do. So let me introduce to you Mr. Frank Brummer.
Thank you, Rick. Wow, this is humbling. I want to express my deepest gratitude to my family, to the Farmwell team, and to the Trek board. You have filled my life story. I want to wish happy birthday to my beautiful, amazing daughter-in-law, Marie, on her 29th birthday. And I want to welcome Fran Wiedekamp. Fran's husband, Roy, was one of my favorite customers. He was a fun-loving guy and love to make others laugh. One day he was showing me their new retirement home in Raymond, Illinois. And Roy stood in the front yard and he said, "Isn't this the perfect place to live?" And then he pointed across the road and he goes, "Right there is the KC Hall for a beer and fellowship. And right there is the Catholic Church for my spiritual needs and my funeral. What more could we ask for?" I loved Roy. I think many here in Effingham County could say the same. We are blessed with great schools, beautiful churches, quality jobs, and really good, generous people. Being involved with Trek has shown me firsthand how good and generous these local people really are. Bill Grimes wrote an article in Effingham Daily News about Phase 4 Trail, and that Trek needed $52,000 to complete this project. The next day, unsolicited, Bob Wilmberg called and said J&J Ventures will donate the $52,000. Just keep building trails. That's all he wanted. A few years ago, I met with Clarence and Jeanette Unkraut and asked them for a quarter-mile-long easement right across their farmland. They easily said yes, and when I asked them what they wanted in return, they said nothing. It's the right thing to do for the community. Clarence said, "I just hope I live long enough to see the bridge built across the Little Wabash River." That's all he wanted. There are so many great stories in this community and so many great projects. And all these projects provide opportunities for us to give and for us to get involved. Teutopolis and Altamont, both schools, both have IT initiatives. The beautiful new Effingham Public Library, amazing. The soon-to-be-open new sports complex. Rural water, EJ Water. Lakeland College, so near and dear to my heart. The CEO class, 40 amazing, bright, highly motivated students with us here today, also very near and dear to my heart. These are just a few. There are so many good projects, and all of these are so important in bringing our youth home today. But as I extensively travel this great country and study the quality of life amenities that other communities offer their youth, I wonder, are we really doing enough to bring our youth back home to Effingham County? There's a paradigm shift happening in this country. The youth of yesterday found a job and moved there. The youth of today, the millennial generation, picks where they want to live. They move where the quality of life is high. They move where outdoor activities are plentiful. And then they find a job there. And businesses are following. The millennials are the 18 to 34-year-olds, and they are the largest and most well-educated workforce in this country. Quality of life is a top priority for where this generation chooses to live. I recently asked a local young father of 2 children what was important to him in finding a community. He said, "We want to live in a community where our children can safely bike to school and to parks. Bike-safe communities and trails are one of the top priorities for where this generation chooses to live. Every child deserves a safe route to bike and walk to school, and progressive communities are filling that need. My dream for Effingham County is that it becomes the next hot pocket for youth seeking a high quality of life. And I think we have a good start. The take home is we need to look at our communities through the eyes of our youth. Put ourselves in their shoes and then ask, what more could they ask for? And then make it happen. Build it. Provide it. Take action. When we really get this right, we will attract young families, fill our schools again, and improve our quality of life. Attracting the sons and daughters of Effingham County back home should be our top priority. At Farmweld, we seek out those youth who have moved away, and sometimes we're successful. We called Ryan Jansen, offered him a job, and was successful in getting Ryan and his family to sell their home in Peoria and move back to Teutopolis. Inviting our youth back home should be very important to us. We should all do it. We know who they are. We know who moved away. But then take action. Help them find a job, or help them find a place to live, or help them find a lot to build on. A recently married Teutopolis alumni was sharing with me that he's thinking about building a home in Cumberland County. I told him, "You are killing me." I said, "Please build in Teutopolis School District. We want your children." He said, "My wife and I would love to build in Unit 50. But where? If we don't provide for the needs of our youth, other communities will gladly do so." I could cite many communities across this country who are successfully growing and filling their schools. But I don't have to go any farther than Diedrich to state my case. Diedrich is a textbook example of getting this right, and are successfully attracting young families and filling their schools. By providing large building lots with all utilities and sidewalks for $5,000, Diedrich is capitalizing on the fact that millennials don't want high debt. Remember, millennials are highly educated and realize that low debt adds to a high quality of life. The take home here is we should all invite our youth back home and then take action and fill their needs. Let's shift gears here. I often get asked, how does a farm boy from the bottom half of his class borrow $12,000 from his father and start a successful international business? I want to share 4 strong influences in my life. Like most of us here, I was blessed with great parents. I was very, very close to my father. And I loved working on the farm with him, and I assumed that I would follow in his footsteps. My father shocked me when I was 16 years old and told me he was retiring early and turning the farm over to my older brother, and that I should get a job in town. My mother was filled with optimism and always told me that I could be anyone I wanted to be. So I grabbed that optimism from my mother, headed to Lakeland College with a new dream to start my own welding shop. The take home for all of us parents is optimism is powerful. The second influence is 3 really strong mentors who invested deeply in me. Joe Evans was my welding instructor at Lakeland College, and he took a deep personal interest in my life. And as we neared graduation time, Joe lined up high-paying union jobs for every one of his students, except me. So one day I asked Joe, I says, "Hey, can I get one of those high-paying jobs?" And he said, "No, Frank, I won't help you get a job. You came here with the dream to start your own business. I believe in you. Now go do it." Joe Evans set the course for my life, and I am forever indebted to Joe and to Lakeland College. In May of 1979, my first week in my own welding shop, Chuck Stevens, owner of Stevens Industries from Totopolis, stopped in, wished me success, and invited me to freely use his metalworking machines. The use of these metalworking machines was valuable, but that was nothing compared to the mentoring relationship that developed. Many years later, on a 1,000-mile boating trip on the Mississippi River, Chuck and I were cooking a shore lunch. And I asked Chuck, "What is your number one regret in selling Stevens?" And he said that I didn't sell it earlier. I wish I would have sold it when I was your age and in good health. When Chuck spoke, I listened. When I got home from that trip, I started the process to sell my company. Chuck would just stop in at Farmweld and informally mentor me for 33 years. A few weeks before he died, it was Chuck's last time out of his house. His son, Tony Stevens, called me and said, "Dad isn't feeling well, but he wants to come over for one last talk." Chuck and I shared deeply that day. His final wishes are forever etched on my heart. Never stop living your dreams, and never stop loving life. My third mentor, and the last man standing, is Bill Austin. Bill was with me from the very start of Farmweld and through every major business deal, and then guided me through the sale of the company. I can remember vividly on closing day, when things weren't going as well as I had hoped, and tensions in the room were very high, Bill's taking me into a private room and adjusting my attitude. Like no one can do better than Bill. The take home here is we all need good mentors. And equally, we all need to look for opportunities to be mentors, to help guide and inspire others. The third influence to farm world success, I don't even need to tell you, and that is the hard work ethic of this area. You can't teach that. It's part of our culture. It comes from the example at home. And that is the reason this whole area is so successful in sports, academics, and business. Farmworld is 3 to 4 times more profitable than our peers. 3 to 4 times. And those profits don't come from patents or proprietary products. They come from the hard work ethic of this group. The take home is hire the local youth. They carry that hard work gene. The fourth influence to farm world success is loyalty. Customers often say to me, farm world is like a family. And I tell them, no, we are not like a family. We are family. We have spent many years working together. Collectively here this morning, the 11 of us have 178 years of service to Farmworld. We have rafted the Grand Canyon. We've snowmobiled the High Rockies. We've canoed the Boundary Waters and done many other adventure trips together. We have done 34 Christmas parties together at Kathy and I's home. We have paid for drug and alcohol rehab. We care for each other. We're loyal. I will share one story that demonstrates our loyalty to each other. Warren Buffett, one of the richest self-made billionaires in the world, sent his acquisition team into Totopolis to buy Farmworld. I picked them up at the local airport in Effingham. Lori Rundy and I gave them a tour of the plant. And then we all sat down in my office. And I made it very clear to them that before we started negotiations, I needed their personal promise that the jobs would stay right here in Effingham County. But they made it clear to me that we can't make that promise. But if we move the plant, the jobs will move with the plant. That reply ended negotiations with Warren Buffett's group. I thanked them for coming, took them to the King's Country Kitchen for an early lunch, and back to their private jet. Farmworld's success is built on loyalty, and there is no way, for no price, that loyalty is for sale. And the Farmworld team shows that same loyalty every day. Our take home is we can't expect loyalty from the team unless we give it. Let's shift gears again. Television has never been a part of my life story. I grew up with a deep love for reading biographies. Reading these biographies gave me an unquenchable thirst for adventure travel. And I've shared that passion and love for reading and travel with my family. I rarely talk about my travels, but today I'm going to share just a few of family highlights. To celebrate the new millennium, I took each of the 4 children on an adventure trip. My son Michael was only 8 years old, and since he was a dog lover, we spent a week dog sledding up into Canada. I remember one really rough section of the trail, and the sled tipped over, and 8-year-old Michael just hung on for his life while the dogs drug him through the ice and snow. Unforgettable. My son Nick and I spent a week climbing Mount Rainier, a very dangerous mountain and a tough climb, and a true test of endurance. Today, 15 years later, summiting Rainier is still our greatest physical accomplishment. My son Bobby and I spent a week sea kayaking in Glacier Bay, Alaska, with huge humpback whales spouting right in front of our kayak. Bears present every time we tried to set up our tent, orcas, mountain goats, seals, wolves. Few people ever get to see a wolf in the wild. Bobby saw 5 on that one trip. 13-year-old Anne-Marie, poor 13-year-old Anne-Marie and I spent a week touring Red Square in Moscow. Then flew completely across Siberia, chartered an old war helicopter, and flew to Wrangel Island, Siberia. Wrangel Island is 600 miles north of the Arctic Circle, home to the 24-hour summer sun, huge polar bears, walruses, seals, Arctic foxes, and musk oxen. We saw giant woolly mammoth tusk still laying on the frozen tundra. For 3 weeks, Anne-Marie and I walked, talked, and camped together. We drank from the streams, we ate freshly killed reindeer, and picked greens off the tundra, truly living off the land. And it was July, but we were still caught in a 3-day blinding snow blizzard. And there were no reindeer to kill, and no greens to pick, and no source of food. We laid in our tent and read and reread books and talked and fought hunger. We laid in our tents and wondered, who can last longer, that blizzard or us? In 2004, Kathy and I walked 120 miles around Mont Blanc. We walked through the corner of France, Italy, and Switzerland. Daily, we were rewarded with the amazing, breathtaking views of the high Alps, like those seen in The Sound of Music. One day I asked Michael, where do you want to travel to next? And he said, anywhere but Asia. I don't understand that culture. So, the next trip, we went and biked across Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand, and explored and learned many new cultures and ways of life. When Michael was 14 years old, we biked 12 countries, 1,200 miles across Europe. One day we got separated for a few very stressful hours. And this was before cell phones. And when we finally found each other, I started to say something in my fatherly voice. And Michael spoke over me in his 14-year-old voice and said, Dad, there are 2 sides of this story, and I don't want to hear yours. Just like Michael had his own story on that bike trip, each one of you has your own story. As we leave here today, let's commit to filling our life story with more family fun and adventure. Let's fill the pages of our life story with more optimism, more mentoring, more work filled with passion, and loyalty. As we leave today, let's commit to filling our life with more community giving and inviting our youth back home. If we do that, we too will truly be able to say, what more could we ask for? Thank you, and Godspeed.